Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 19 of Chess Basics, things every chess player ought to know. Today we're continuing our look at Ruy Lopez defense or opening, and we're going to look at miscellaneous defenses on the third move, that options that black has on the third move. So let's go ahead and put that position up. It's e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. And this is the Ruy Lopez, and the moves we looked at previously were a6 and knight f6. So a6 the Morphy defense and knight f6 the Berlin defense. But you can see there's a lot of others. They're less common, but that doesn't mean they're not playable. Some of them are kind of interesting, and you will see them occasionally. I haven't seen all of these, but I have faced a couple of these before myself, so you may need to have some idea of what to do. But I have to admit that I'm going to cheat a little bit here and keep up the opening book and Houdini as I go through this, because I don't actually know all these openings down cold. So maybe I've fallen short of the standard of what every chess player ought to know here. But that's the way it is. I thought since we talked so much about the Ruy Lopez, I should sort of round it out with some of these lesser played options, just to give you some idea of what to do. So let's take a look at the first one on the list here, is a Schliemann. Pretty interesting move. It's a gambit, and it's one of those gambits where it's actually not particularly good to take the pawn. So let's take a brief look at that. You grab the pawn, and black continues with e4, harassing your knight. And your knight has no good squares to go to. It's those are covered by his knight, those are covered by his queen, and these are covered by your pieces. So, and if you run back to g1, his queen comes out to g5 and threatens multiple things, primarily taking on g2 and hitting the rook, but also threatening the pawn there. So this is just not particularly good. You can play queen e2 to pin the pawn. He stops, and then if you take the knight here with the bishop, then that gives you a flight square for your knight, but you've also given up the bishop pair, and it's about an even game. This valuation will change as the computer thinks about it, but pretty much black is equalized in this line, so you don't typically play that way. The most common move here, if we go forward again, after the Schliemann, the most common move is knight c3, although I'm not recommending this. This move is kind of tricky, and I'll show you. Knight c3. Then if he takes the pawn, you can take back with the knight. But then he gets this move d5, and that's pretty interesting move here. And if you run, you can just go to knight g3. If you're going to play this way, probably knight g3 is the way to go. But if we back up a second, you see that knight g3 is not the book move here. It's the knight takes e5, and it's also the move recommended by the computer. And it's kind of weird. So knight takes e5, he can just grab your knight, but you get this knight. And he doesn't want to take back, because after pawn takes knight, bishop takes pawn is a check, hits the king and the rook, and so you're going to win material. But he has this move, queen g5, and now he's hitting this pawn and this bishop. It's important to hit the bishop, because otherwise this knight moves. It's a discovered check, and it could be very dangerous. But now you have the option of queen takes bishop after the knight moves with discovered check, unless the knight defends the bishop. So anyway, it's complicated. I can't really recommend that. I think the way to play this, and you'll see this is a common theme in many, so we go f5. In many Ruy Lopez type positions, sometimes you just want to play d3. Just shore up your center. It's a solid move, and it has the advantage in this situation where your bishop is already outside the pawn chain, so you're not going to get blocked in here. And so that's the move I'm recommending. And he can continue developing with knight f6, or he can take, and then you take back with the pawn, obviously, because that's the only piece there. But you just try and maintain your center, and that's the way to play it. And you get your usual slight opening advantage. It should lead to a playable position, which I think is the main thing you should be going for, unless you want to become an expert in this particular line. Mostly you just want to get to a playable position when you see some weird line like this, because you have to figure your opponent is more of an expert in this opening than you are. Otherwise he wouldn't be playing it. So f5, that's the Schliemann. Bishop c5 here is known as the Cordell defense. And actually I have a video, it's the first video in my Over the Board Chess playlist, where I talk about the Cordell defense and the Cordell defense deferred, which is what happens if you play a6 first and then bishop c5. So why don't you take a look at that if you're interested in the Cordell, and I'll go on to d6, which is the old Steinitz defense. And so after d6, and this is another defense where you can play it either right away or you can throw in a6 and then play d6. Let's go forward, d6. Because the knight is pinned, you can answer this with d4 and just try and set up control of the center. And so I think your play is pretty straightforward here. He's going to try and unpin his knight. You bring your knight forward just for development and to shore up the center. And now he could take. It's one of the moves. He takes d4. But it leaves you with a good position. You're not really threatening to take here because it's all well defended. But so he can just develop with knight f6, attacking this pawn, and you can castle. But it's a playable position. You have slightly more space. You have one pawn in the center, which is further advanced than his center pawn. And the other way he can try and play instead of taking is he can just continue with knight f6. And this is similar. You just castle, and he develops his bishop, put your rook on an open file. So all very logical development, and you don't need a lot of preparation to play this kind of stuff, and you get your typical small opening advantage with white. You have slight advantage in space, and your pieces are a little better placed. His are kind of passively set up here. But doesn't mean it's particularly bad. I mean, it's a solid defense for black as well, so that can all be played. What else do we want to look at? So yeah, here we are. a6, knight f6, so Morphy defense, Berlin defense, Schliemann defense, Cordell, Steinitz. g6 here. This is known as the Smyslov. I've never seen this in actual play. It's a much slower plan. You know, he's going to eventually get his bishop over here to g7 and just try and get some pressure along this diagonal, and you can counter it by just doing the normal Ruy Lopez buildup of c3 and d4 castle. So I don't think there's a whole lot to say about this. There's not any great tactics here. This is a slow kind of positional setup. So a6, bishop a4, all very common themes. Okay, he's shoring up his center here, and then you get in d4. And it's interesting it has bishop d7 here. I guess he's worried if you play bishop g7 here, you might take the pawn, take the knight, and try and win a pawn or something. Is that right? No, I don't know why. Here, let's put this move on the board and see what the computer says. Bishop takes c6 check. B takes c6. D takes e5. I guess that's the point. He doesn't want to trade queens here. That would leave him with messed up pawns and a king that can't castle. And so I guess white would just have a better position there. So so in this position, of course, he could think of playing b5 as a way of stopping that as well. Let's see what happens on b5. Just bishop b3. Yeah, seems playable. Or the book line bishop d7 here. And castles. So you get a typical kind of Ruy setup where you have the big center and the bishop over here and the knight over here. All looks pretty reasonable. So I don't think you need a whole lot of preparation to play that. So let's go back. Oops, clicking the wrong button. Let's go back to the branching point here. So knight d4. This is another interesting one. This is called bird's defense. And looks a little bit wacky. The wacky bird. The normal move here, the book move, is to just take the knight. And he gets doubled pawns. But your bishop is sometimes a little bit awkwardly placed over here and gets kicked around. So the idea of castling, and then he kicks with c6 and then coming to c4, trying to put a break on this move d5. which could still be played apparently, but it would leave him with doubled pawns. Or he can go with knight f6 and start attacking this pawn immediately, more likely. And it's not so good to defend with d3 because you may want the bishop to come back to this side of the board. You haven't really got any defenders over here on the king, and that's one of the things you have to watch out for with the bird is if your light squared bishop gets trapped away from the action and black gets a king side attack, it can go pretty well for black. Another way to play this, and this is actually what I've done in practice when I've seen this, is after knight d4, just take the bishop back to c4. It's a perfectly good square for the bishop, and it gets your bird player out of book. The real downside here is that he can go on and take your knight, and it forces your queen out, and this isn't necessarily the best square for your queen. But it's about an even position with the usual slight edge for white, so it means nothing to be afraid of. But if you're up for the challenge, the more challenging move with the bird is to take the knight, and both are playable. Okay, back up once more. So we've gone through them all except for the last one. This one is called the Casio, knight ge7. I actually saw Nakamura play this once in a recent game, so maybe this will come back into popularity. So knight ge7 is sort of logical. He's defending his knight, so if you take it, he gets another knight there. So this pawn on e5 is well defended. You can just castle, and then he goes with g6 as the most common plan. And so it sort of resembles the other one. The bishop comes here and tries to get pressure along this diagonal. And you counter it with c3 and d4. And then he can exchange and hit back in the center with d4. And then you can either take the pawn or push ahead with e5, depending upon what you prefer. If you take the pawn, he's going to take back with the knight, probably. Let's see if that's the opening book. Yeah, queen takes is possible, but knight takes is most common. You've got an isolated pawn. Both sides have the bishop pair. You have slightly easier development for your pieces. You're going to get in a check, although he can block it easily enough. So slight edge for white. You have a long-term weakness in the isolated pawn, but in the middle game you have more activity. So that's one way to play if you like the isolated queen's pawn position. Or you could just push ahead with e5 and try and directly limit the scope of his dark squared bishop there. It's another way to play. Either way should be fine for white. And that will conclude this episode on all the miscellaneous defenses to the Ruy Lopez. Let's get back to this position. So it's right here, right after you play bishop b5. So these are all the options here. a6, the Morphy, knight f6, the Berlin, f5, the Schliemann gambit, bishop c5, the Cordell, d6, the Steinitz, or the old Steinitz, g6, the Smyslow for Barnes, knight d4, the Bird, and knight ge7, the Casio. And that's just a quick overview. You should be able to handle them all reasonably well. They're not the most threatening of openings, just a few little tricks to be wary of. And keep in mind this move d3. It helps in a lot of weird defenses to shore up your center and not get too deep into some complicated variation that your opponent knows better than you do. Okay, next episode we're going to wrap up the Ruy Lopez with a look at the famous Marshall Gambit, so stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoyed this one. And if you have any comments, leave them in the section below. See you later. Bye.